everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Nina. I hope you're doing fantastically well. And today I wanted to quickly talk about something that I have been thinking a lot about lately, and that is this belief that I think we've all been conditioned to have, that our life needs to be some kind of performance. I think because of social media and the ability that anyone now has to look us up and see what we are doing whenever they feel like it, we kind of have this feeling that people are noticing what we are doing, and not only noticing, but maybe even making judgments about our lives or even being critical about our lives. And I think this really does affect us on many levels. Firstly, we have this new pressure to try to impress this invisible audience out there and make it look like our life is a masterpiece. I think that we feel like we have to try to earn their applause somehow by living our life a certain way. And I think that unconsciously, more and more, we are starting to live our life for the outside world as opposed to for our own authentic selves in many, many cases. Something else I've noticed is that collectively, we've also started to judge ourselves a lot more. We are critical of ourselves. And I think that this is almost in anticipation of what we think other people are going to say about us, what their judgments are going to be, and we adjust accordingly. I think this really has led to a lot of behavior change because we think that in order to avoid this potential criticism, that we have to be perfect, or we have to at least appear to be perfect, which is going to mean that we are not going to do things where we think that failure could be a possibility. And we're going to stick to only doing things that we really believe that we are good at and that there's going to be success at. And we've forgotten that in order to have success in reality in life for most things, there are going to be failures, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be a process that is followed. You're not going to have immediate success for something that is valuable. But because we don't want other people to see these mistakes or these failures, it's almost forced us on this narrow path of doing things where, again, we don't believe that failure is going to be a possibility. Something else that I think is becoming increasingly problematic is comparison, because let's face it, we can now compare ourselves to absolutely anyone, not just in our own real world, but across the globe. And most of the time, we are not making apples to apples comparisons. We will look at ourselves at the very beginning of a journey and compare ourselves to someone who's invested 30 years into learning something and has already put in all this time and effort. And we think, why can't I be like this? I must be a failure, not realizing how much it took to get there. And I think this fear of comparison has become so great that many times we often give up things that we actually really enjoy, or things that we really would be good at if we would just allow ourselves the time to nurture it, because we aren't getting that immediate gratification. We are not getting that immediate applause. So we think that we have to be a failure because it's not an instant success for us. So for example, if someone wants to learn how to paint and actually shows a lot of promise, but they put a picture of what they are doing on Instagram and it doesn't get a lot of attention, or it doesn't get a lot of likes, or if they go on to other people's pages and they compare their work to what they are seeing and they notice that this person has a lot of likes and a lot of attention, or they compare themselves and they think that this person really is so much better than me. Even though art is completely subjective, they may put their brushes down forever. They may stop completely because of this comparison, because of this fear of judgment or this self-judgment. These things have really started to dictate what we believe is a valuable way for us to spend our time. So I think, unfortunately, we've all kind of gotten stuck in this cycle where if we even try something, the second we mess up, we assume we are a failure and we give up immediately. We think there's no room for mistakes, and the things that other people don't approve of or they don't give us applause for, we simply think is a waste of time. We are so afraid of negative feedback that we even apologize for our performance ahead of time. In fact, the other night I went to a friend's house for dinner and she cooked this absolutely fantastic meal. It was just the most amazing thing ever. But instead of sitting down and enjoying the food with us, all she could do the entire night was apologize. She kept saying that she was so sorry. Usually she does a lot better, and this and this and this was wrong with it. And she went on and on and on, thinking of every possible criticism that we ourselves were definitely not thinking. We thought it was just immaculate. And that just goes to show the burden that we put on ourselves to be perfect. And even when other people think what we are doing appears to be perfect, we find faults that don't even exist. And when I got home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the experience. I was going over it in my head again and again and again. And I finally realized that this toxic mindset has infected so many of us. So many of us believe that we need to apologize for our life and assume that everyone is criticizing us and judging us, even when that is absolutely not the case. And it's just sucking the joy out of our life completely. And I realized that I am guilty of this too. How many times have I apologized for things that don't need apologizing for? How many times have I assumed that people are being critical of me even when they probably don't even care what I am doing? And once I realized this, I also realized that what does it matter? What does it matter what other people think? Why should we even have this as a consideration? It's great when we come to this conclusion because we can also realize that there is another option. We can simply decide that this mindset is complete garbage and adopt an entirely new one where we think of life as a journey, as an adventure, as an experiment for us and us alone, where the goal isn't to impress other people, but simply to discover and to enjoy. And when we learn to live this way, really the only failure becomes not trying things. So we start on this new cycle of trying things, and when we mess up, as we probably will because that is part of life, we simply grow from these mistakes. We learn from them and then we try again. And eventually we surprise ourselves because we get really good at a lot of things that we never would have considered before when we were so caught up in that fear of failure. We find a lot of things that we find fun and fascinating, and we end up really broadening our horizon, and our life becomes a lot more fulfilling. We just have to remind ourselves sometimes not to let the rest of the world write our story, because so often that is exactly what we are doing. But it is our own story to write. It doesn't matter the opinions of other people. Who cares what their judgments or criticisms are? Because they don't have to live this life. We have to live this life. And that's why it's so important that we start to honor our authentic selves again. Our life does not need to be a performance for anybody. The only applause, the only validation that we really need comes from ourselves. So as always, I truly hope that you found today's video to be insightful and something that you can relate to. And if you did, please like it, share it, and definitely become a subscriber if you're not one already. I would absolutely love it if you stayed connected. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I hope the rest of your day is extraordinary.